So it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you my University of South Carolina Upstate friends, and in particular, Dr. Brendan Kelly. I've had the opportunity to work with them for the last year and a half, and I can honestly say that this team works as hard as any team that I've ever worked with, and they're highly focused to wanting to do the right thing. And Dr. Kelly is a driver, very passionate, and is probably, to me, going to be one of the best leaders in this country. He's a president at the University of South Carolina Upstate, and it's with great pleasure that I introduce him to you.
Thank you, Madam. Appreciate you, especially since that raises expectations so high. I'm really pleased to be able to join you today. I'll tell you that I came from the University of West Florida most recently. Janet is connected to that university. We've got a number of people in this room who are connected to that university. Part of the reason why we're here with Studer Education is because I had the great pleasure of having a friendship and having Quinn Studer as a mentor. Continuous improvement of organizations, the notion that we can get better, is built into my DNA. And I say that in front of 4 of my close and cherished colleagues for all of the pain that DNA causes them. I say that because I left the University of West Florida in 2016. I was named Chancellor at USC Upstate. When I came to Upstate, those 2 institutions were very similar in many ways. Both 50 years old, both really driven by the regions that they're in. But the University of South Carolina Upstate was unique. Unique because in its 50th year, when you asked anybody about the university, they told you all about its history. You'd say, tell me about the University of South Carolina Upstate. And they'd say, well, we were invented because of a healthcare crisis in Spartanburg. And in 1967, 177 people enrolled so that they could study nursing in the ground floor of the hospital. And that's where the story usually ended. We talked about it all the time. We ignored the 1 million square feet that we had built over the years. We ignored the fact that we were the 5th largest university in the state of South Carolina. We ignored the fact that we were the 19th fastest growing county in the United States and in the 4th fastest growing region in the United States. We were ignoring the fact that when we look forward to that enrollment cliff that is coming, in the state of South Carolina, that decline is 0. We didn't talk about our future. We only talked about what we were. So for the University of South Carolina Upstate, for us, it was a matter of developing a roadmap to somewhere. We needed to make certain that we cherished and honored the place that we were going. We had a lot of people who loved the university. We had faculty and staff who loved the university. They were passionate about the university. They were passionate about the students they were in service to, and the students they were in service to loved the university, and more importantly, loved the region. Of all the universities in the state of South Carolina, Upstate has the highest percentage of graduates that live and work in that state, and most of those live and work in the Upstate. That's a value proposition for a state with a growing economy and a region with an expanding economy. So that roadmap for us had to include starting to set goals, starting to decide on our purpose. And we went into a strategic planning process. Now, we had strategic plans in the past. I say that because I have one colleague here who I consider to be the most brilliant of all of my colleagues. That's Dr. Kim Purdy. She was the chair of my search committee. She now leads University College as dean and also as assistant assistant provost for academic affairs. When we went into that strategic planning process, it was inviting a lot of people who love the university, both externally and internally, into a process of charting our course. And that's what we did. We included more than 500 people in strategic planning. When we came out of it, we had one sheet. One sheet after a few months of planning. I mean, lots of stakeholder sessions, lots of maps. You know, when you do strategic planning, you write on the big sheets and then you hang them on the walls and then you take things away. And we did the same thing. Had a wonderful consultant who helped us achieve that outcome. And we identified 3 strategic priorities and 5 objectives with each of those. And then we presented that to the university community. And so many of them would say, hey, that's one that I came up with. Well, these sound like what we are. This doesn't sound like we're trying to reinvent the university or change anything. It sounds like we're trying to be what we want to be. And then we got to ask the key question, well, where's the strategic plan? I said, what do you mean? They said, well, I see the strategic priorities and we have objectives with each of those, but where's the plan? I said, what do you mean, like a document? They said, yeah, like the long document. I mean, like the 100-page document that outlines everything that we're going to do and how we're going to do it that nobody reads? And the answer was, yeah, that document, that's the one we're looking for. We never did that, and we never had a plan to do that. When you come into a university community, one that had been through some tumult from a few years before that, we needed a change in how we do business. And we needed to work on one thing that university would need to be dedicated to for its next 50 years, and that was getting better. It didn't much matter how we got better, because that was built into the structure of the university. A regional comprehensive university in the upstate of South Carolina has to be certain things to its region. It's not a university that's going to try to become a Michigan State. That's not our purpose. We weren't built to do that. Plus, the weather is far too nice in South Carolina. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. I understand well. So we went through that strategic planning process. We came up with those 3 strategic priorities, and we focused in on our purpose. And then every meeting agenda had to reference an agenda item with a strategic priority, which everybody looked at us funny and thought we were silly for doing that. And after about the time we were done with that strategic planning process, we engaged tutor education. We engaged it because we knew if we were going to have to change the fabric of the way in which we do business at the university, working on our business rather than in our business. I mean, really focusing in on working how we do business as a university. We were going to need a process that was going to be a little different than a paper document. So when we engaged tutor education, we started going into the strategic execution process. Our first step was to do an organizational assessment, to take all of our leaders, quite frankly, many of which are no longer at the university, and start to read or get their read on what the university was, how we were functioning, where the way in which we did business sat in relationship to our strategic priorities. That organizational assessment was our first data set, and it was one that so many of our leaders wanted to challenge because they did not like what it had to say. That led us into a process as an executive team that also went through a lot of transition into creating the University Scorecard. A University Scorecard process was a critical one for us. I say that because when you take a team of people who, many of which had been at that institution for a long time, when I got there, there was a cabinet in place. When we did the strategic planning process, we had a cabinet in place -1. By the time we were done with the scorecard process, about half of the cabinet had been replaced, either by retirement or otherwise. By the time we publicly announced that scorecard process, that change continued to move. And now I have a cabinet of 15 people. There are 3 who were in those positions when we started. Now, I say that publicly, not because that was the core of our organizational change. But I love Sabrina's use of, you have to get the right people on the bus. We were in a little different situation. We were building a new bus. And when you build a new bus, some people decide that that's not something they want to ride on, and that's okay. We have a lot of great institutions and opportunities in the United States, and people get to go and take advantage of them. When you serve a public university, we need people who are interested in doing the work that is most important to the constituent audiences for that university at that time. And this process allowed people to figure out where they sat in relationship to their own work. When we set about the business of creating the University Scorecard, we had to decide what was actually important. What was going to make our university operate in a state like many of yours, where state support has gone down considerably. But for us in 2008 to 2018, that meant a 40% decrease in state support during that period of time. So let's call it 9 cents on the dollar at this point for a public university in South Carolina. If that's the case, then enrollment's going to be a key driver, just like retention is going to be a key driver. And if those two things are key drivers, then employee satisfaction all of a sudden becomes a key driver. And if employee satisfaction and retention are key drivers, then diversity and inclusion become a key driver. If you're a regional comprehensive university in the upstate of South Carolina, being woven into industry and communities become key drivers. Now, those sound like very familiar drivers for so many institutions in this room. What changed for us is that when we decided on what key drivers were, we were deciding that other things were not. Which means all of our conversation, all of our effort, everything that we were doing was focused in on those measures. And that's where divisional scorecards came from. University Scorecard broke our 3 strategic priorities out, and then we inserted measures that were the key things that were going to drive our success. Since that process started, the measures have continued to contract as time goes on, because we discover that things that we thought were important are no longer. For instance, recently, one of the key things, something we were very proud of as a priority for Upstate, was testing employer satisfaction with our graduates. So making certain that we can go out and know that the talent that we're producing for the Upstate of South Carolina aligns with the needs of employers and that they're satisfied with the talent and the way we're producing it. What we discovered was survey data for that particular data point didn't matter. Labor market data is the one that mattered, and it was attached to other key drivers so that those measurements continue to contract, and we continue to become more focused. Now, all of this work was done in the context of an executive team, and that's the easy work. It's taking it out to all of the other leaders that becomes the challenge. Many of you who are deans in the room know what reluctance means. And certainly university leadership across the scope of an institution has that built into their DNA. We are communities of experts. We are critics by nature. My PhD is in political communication and rhetoric. I actually majored in criticism. So we started getting everybody together and having leadership development institutes. Those leadership development institutes started out with a lot of people in the room staring at each other and us talking about strategic improvement with Dr. Pilcher and myself helping to lead through that conversation. They started out with people accepting that the Chancellor made them sit down and made them sit in the room together and made them listen to Janet Pilcher. But it didn't necessarily translate into meaningful work at that time. It took us a little time. It took us, and you heard Sabrina use the term strategic cadence. It took us a little time to get into that as well. And then finally, last January, we hit one of those turning points. We had gone through the process of creating a strategic plan. We had gone through the process of infusing that throughout the institution by making sure it was constituent-based. We had gone through the process of creating a university scorecard, which forced us to look very hard at what we were going to say is important. We committed ourselves to those things that were important. We translated that university scorecard into divisional scorecards. All of the vice chancellors were equipped with more precise measures that related to the work in their divisions. They had worked with their leadership teams and their employees to devise all of those processes. We had translated those divisional scorecards into blueprints that would define specific actions in specific areas that would attempt to affect the divisional scorecards, which would then feed into the organizational scorecard. We had all of this system set up, but when we had 99 leaders in a room for Leadership Development Institute, it was still difficult for them to see how this process was informing all of their work. The reason I say last January is because last January was the first time we had a Leadership Development Institute where we had data to inform a measure. Keep in mind, our strategic planning process started in April of 2017 and was completed in October of 2017. We announced that strategic plan in the spring of 18 and devised the scorecard process. So January of 19 is us moving pretty briskly to create the organization that you see on the screen. One of our key drivers, one of the most important things for USC Upstate was retention. And we had done a lot of things to try to increase retention and using lots of different measures. We wanted to see the retention of our part-time students. We are the third largest recipient of transfer students in the state of South Carolina. University of South Carolina and Columbia gets about 22% of transfer students per year. Clemson, 12.4%. And then in third place, USC Upstate with 11.8%. The next closest university in the state is College of Charleston, and they're around 5% of transfer students. So we really need to understand retention in a wide variety of different ways. And we got all of that data, and we walk into the Leadership Development Institute, and we said, we're going to talk about retention today, and let's share the data. And we did, and we had gone down. We had a greater drop in retention than in any of the previous fall semesters in the last 5 years. So all of the things that we thought we were doing right, we were really concentrating on doing better, and we sucked. And the first thing that occurred were people questioning the data, telling us why it's wrong. Who's not counted? I don't think you've got my college right. This whole process is wrong. We've got to, and the chancellor's not nice. And I said, stop. This isn't what this is about. If there's anybody in this room who needs to be scared of this data, if there's anybody in this room who this data reflects poorly on, it's me. I'm responsible for everything that happens at this university. So we can either sit here, blame me, blame each other, or we can try to figure out how to make it better. And then we started talking. We had a session where half of the people, not all of the people, but half of the people started trying to figure out what we're going to do next. They started trying to chart our future. Nobody was talking about what happened in 1967. Nobody was talking about what our retention rate was in 1985. There were a few people who were telling us all the stuff we had tried before, and while what we were going to try in the future wasn't going to work based on what we tried before, those people work at your universities too. But all of a sudden, the people who were talking about what we're going to do next started to say, that voice isn't as valuable. We all need to be working together. All of a sudden, we were turning our failure into the pathway for our future. We followed that up by continuing to gather data. We launched an employee engagement survey so that we could capture baseline data on how our own employees feel about leadership. I think there were 12 questions that mentioned me specifically on that survey. We went through every single division. We shared that back with leadership so that we could be a place that people wanted to work. And if it's a place that people want to work, they will tell you that they want to work there. And if the things that you're doing are not things that make them want to work there, they will tell you that too. Our job was to accept it and then go do something about it. We started launching a support services survey so that we could ask all of our leaders who interact with all of the support services that make a university operate how we're doing. Are we offering service excellence? Is this really the way in which we should be doing business? Are you pleased with the service? Where are our limitations? Where are our successes? When we got that data back, we had some people who went, well, I guess people are receiving our services well. Others that scored very low. And you watched some people take that very personally. It's not there to take it personally. We're a public university. We're comprised of people, and sometimes we're going to service them well, and sometimes we're not. The next Leadership Development Institute that we came to, we presented a new piece of data. Data about how we were going to apply for an award as well, but we realized we really weren't qualified yet. We hadn't done all of the right things. And all of a sudden, everybody went, oh, this is a great opportunity. We failed. But at least now we know what to do next. And the corrective action started to be taken up by the leaders throughout the room rather than the leaders in the front of the room. Our cadence right now is a simple one. We use the strategic plan to drive everything. If it doesn't fit into the strategic priorities of the strategic plan, then you need to take it to some other university because it's not what we do. We allow that scorecard to sit and drive every single meeting that we have. It has not cascaded down throughout the entire institution yet. But each layer that we break into makes a difference. Because the structure is set up, because the executive team and the cabinet have engaged that, and now deans are engaging it, and head coaches, because we put everybody in the room together. That strategic improvement process is taking on the thing that is probably the greatest success from my perspective is that the term strategic improvement conversation is probably what defines our culture now. We have more people who are interested in talking about our problems because it provides us an opportunity to get better than anything else. And for us, that's the key defining factor. For our university, as I said at the beginning, it's all about just getting better. We have 50 years of getting better to do. And if people are interested in being involved in a process where we get better, where we're constantly working on paying attention to our weaknesses just so that we can go and become strong, if you want to be part of an organization like that, our university is a good one to be part of. If you're a person who really likes to celebrate all of the things you've accomplished in the past and have everybody give you a lot of applause for the things you have accomplished in the past, you need to go work somewhere else because we don't do that very well right now. Getting better is the core of our business model. And I will tell you one of the most gratifying symbols of that is when all of a sudden you start hearing that from your faculty. We've attended in the last 2 weeks a general faculty meeting, all of the faculty at the university and faculty senate. At each of those gatherings, we've had faculty members who raise their hand because they want to make contributions to how we can get better. And they're doing it in a fashion that is aligned with that process. If we get faculty who have accepted and celebrate the process, and I feel like we've landed someplace pretty special. We've got a long way to go, but I will tell you that the alignment between us using our data to align that with our processes and focus in on our results and our outcomes, and we really only care about that cadence, has made for a great university experience for a university that's in transition. Thank you.